where the Beatles started, where they played when they started out, and it's always sold out every gig, and it's just a room full of Beatles fans. So you can't go wrong, really.
Today's guest is multi-instrumentalist who plays keyboards in the long-running theatre show That'll Be the Day. As well as the show Walk Right Back, he has appeared in such iconic venues as the Cavern Club and also releases great original material. Welcome, Sean.
Good evening. How are we doing?
Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing some of your thoughts on your work. Can I start by asking, how did you start in music? And can you give us some background of what you've done musically in the past?
Yeah, sure. I started with guitar lessons at secondary school, um, and I went on to teach myself keyboards because my brother he was learning piano. We had a keyboard at home, um, so I ended up messing around on that, and I realised I probably enjoyed that a little bit more than guitar. So I went from there, and he did the opposite. He was having piano lessons, and then he taught himself guitar. Um, but yeah, and then my first gig was when I was 19, so about 12, 13 years ago. It was with a local band. They were putting together a Beatles tribute band, and the four of them they played the four Beatles, and they needed somebody else to play all the extra parts, all the bells and whistles, so to speak, and the any piano solos like Billy Preston's parts and stuff like that. So I got involved with those guys, and then since then I've played in numerous bands, mostly on keyboards. Done a lot of acoustic solo guitar gigs as well, and then been involved with the theatre shows for the last 4 years or so.
So I guess a lot of sort of, is it Fender that they played? Sort of electric piano sounds and
Yeah, the Fender Rhodes and
and the Mellotron sounds.
yeah, all that. Yeah, so I think we did do Strawberry Fields Forever. So I'd done the intro, and I mean back then the gear I was using was not as good as what I've got now. So my sounds probably weren't as good, but it was all those parts, yeah, and all the orchestral parts to a lot of the psychedelic songs, flutes and trumpets for Penny Lane, stuff like that.
And when you started with that, do you remember the gear that you had in your first gigs?
Yes, I do. It was I was having a play on it the other day actually because I've given the first keyboard I bought. It was a Yamaha. Um, I bought it from Argos, and it was only a couple £100. Um, but it had for what I paid for it. It was okay. It got me through the gigs. But it was I gave it to my brother, and I was round his house the other day, and he's still got all my settings saved on it
Oh,
from those gigs. So I was going through the sounds just to hear them again for the first time in ages, playing the songs I still play now, but um, with different equipment, and it was it was like quite nostalgic to hear the sounds, but it was also quite funny because they weren't brilliant.
sure. No, I understand that. And wait, so you started with the Beatles cover band, and
Yes.
then what happened after that? Did you go straight to the theatre stuff, or was there some in between?
No, quite a lot in between. I formed another band with some friends of mine, and with that, it was more just we were sort of like a function party band. We started off doing like rockabilly and rock and
Nice.
roll, lots of '60s stuff, and then we just ended up adding anything into the set really. Um, I played a lot of sort of piano and organ parts on that, and by then I owned a Hammond SK1,
Nice.
which is what I used with those guys. So the sounds on there were much better. Yeah, so we did that party band, and then we formed with a lot of the same guys. I formed a Britpop band
Oh, nice.
playing loads of '90s stuff, and for that I bought this keyboard, which is a Kurzweil, and I also played accordion in another band. So, and I did all this for a good few years, until just before lockdown when I did the first theatre show, which is by the same guys that produce That'll Be the Day. I
Yeah.
did um, a short tour on the McCartney songbook on keyboards.
There seems to be a little bit of a theme running through this. You mentioned the first was the Beatles, and then you did some sexy stuff, and And actually, I guess in one of the shows you're doing some walk right back as early 60s,
Yeah,
and even some 60s through later years in That'll Be the Day. So where does that influence come from? I've seen you jamming in some bars and things, as well as a solo artist, doing some really old classic stuff. So where does that influence come from? What got you going? Okay, I'm really into the 60s stuff.
I would say, and he'll probably, if he watches this, he'll probably thank me for saying, but it's probably my dad's fault. Yeah, he got me into the Beatles, and he was into all that '60s stuff as well.
Yeah.
So I guess I just sort of, I don't know. There's lots of music from the '60s that I'm into, like the Beach Boys and all sorts. You know, I think it was a very creative decade, and I love all the sounds and the instruments that they used, like Hammond organs and flutes and orchestras and all sorts. You know,
Of course, we have you here today as a keyboard player, but
yes,
you're a tremendous vocalist.
thank you.
Got a nice guitar going on. You got the keyboards going on there. I'm not even sure if you do other things. You may well do other things. I guess when you look at some of those musicians, so you mentioned the Beach Boys, and of course you mentioned McCartney. Just the instrumentation of those bands. Is that what sort of drew you to those bands?
Yeah, I think so, and just great melodies and harmonies and stuff. That's what I learned a lot about vocal harmonies by listening to the
Yeah.
Beach Boys and trying to. I sit down with when I bought an iPad about 12 years ago, and there's a sort of an app on there called GarageBand, which you can get on Mac as well. And
Yeah.
I'd play around with that, layering vocals, and I'll be listening to the Beach Boys, and I'll be going, right, he's singing that, and then oh, there's that above there, and then I'm like, well, there's five of them. Bloody hell, that's great.
And of course, today you can go on YouTube and there are videos where it gives the individual tracks.
Yeah,
You
that's
can hear the
amazing. That.
vocal harmonies. It's
Yeah,
tremendous to hear, and just the work that those guys did at that time.
yeah, it's a real help being able to listen to those isolated parts because it makes it a whole lot easier when if you've got to learn and perform the song, working out what's in there when you're listening to the whole thing as one and trying to pick everything out. It can be quite tricky, but when you hear it isolated, it becomes a lot clearer. But also when you listen to it, the complexity of it really comes through as well, and you can sort of enjoy it just on its own.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about the theatre show. So your first theatre show was the McCartney Songbook. I've seen that. What a great production that is, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So tell me a little bit about sort of joining that. Is that your first big theatre sort of thing that you did?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, the cast was different to the current cast at the time. Our mutual friend Jared now plays keyboards on that. And back then, the drummer was a friend of mine from the first Beatles tribute band I was telling you about
Okay.
from way back in the day, and he was on drums for that, and he recommended me from playing with me years ago for that, and then yeah, that's how I got to know all those guys, and they're the same people that produce Walk Right Back and
Yeah.
That'll Be the Day.
Was Walk Right Back the second? Was that the second one you joined?
Yeah, and Chris, the guy on drums, he was also the drummer on that show. He sort of left just as I joined the show. I remember texting him saying, "Are you going to be on the thing? Because I'm going to be playing piano on it." He said, "Oh no, I'm not doing it now." So oh okay, so it's
Okay.
gone sort of like that. But yeah, so that followed. In I joined that in 2022 and done two UK tours with that and a few
Nice.
over in Canada as well. So that's more of a piano gig, less sort of changing sounds and going from orchestra to electric piano to organ all in one place. It's
Yeah.
mostly a piano gig, which is nice. And that enabled me to I actually really improve my piano playing, just focusing on not having to worry about other sounds, just
Yeah.
focusing on the keyboard in front of you.
It's an incredibly popular show. I guess quite recently is it that you moved on to That'll Be the Day?
Yes.
Now that's I guess a different kettle of fish because there's you got some sounds going on there.
Oh, definitely. I joined that with the day last summer, um, and it's a great fun show, and it's very fast paced. Even not just in terms of what's in the show, but as a performer in it, as a keyboard player, you're having to think, 3 steps ahead. Right, what sound do I need next? What song's coming up next? There's lots of medley, so I've saved everything on the keyboards, so make it as easy as possible for me to just go next, 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 rather than trying to remember all the program numbers or whatever. But it's great fun.
It's a fantastic concept for a show
Yeah.
because those songs just come at you. And when you mention lots of medleys, I guess people might be thinking, oh, well, we do a few medleys. I mean, you guys do some medleys.
I think the whole show is medleys.
You're really hitting out those sounds. So the keyboard player is has got to work. Can you talk us through a little bit?
Yeah,
Do you
sure.
know how many? Do you know how many songs there are approximately in that show? I mean, there's a lot of songs, right?
Yeah, I did have it on a with like a spreadsheet. So I've got one somewhere for the show, and I think it had at least 80 rows. Um, um, and it's not a short show either. I think it's two halves of
Yeah.
80 minutes perhaps, and in each of those halves there's probably a good 40 songs in there. Because a lot of those songs especially from back in the 50s and 60s, they're not long songs
No.
anyway. They're
No.
they're probably only 2 minutes long, but even then we'll sort of trim them even further just to get more in.
Yes.
Trevor, the guy who runs it, he and started it. He describes the show as a magazine. You've never got time to get bored. You just
Absolutely.
or he'll say if you don't like a song, but before it's annoying you, it's changed to something
Next one.
else. So
And that's exactly what it is. It just goes, and it's great, and it's
yeah.
colorful, and it's great musicians, and it's just wonderful to watch. So I guess when you first got the call and they
Mm.
sent you the list of songs and you made your Excel spreadsheet, talk us a little through that if you wouldn't mind, because there's a lot to
Yeah.
take in. Is the set list locked in? Do you have a really good idea? How did you go about getting it all together?
I'm trying to remember how it happened actually, in terms of getting a set list. I think I was sent one, um, but because they were still putting the show together, I
Yes.
think things were still changing. So nothing. It wasn't 100%. That's what we're doing, because we'll get to rehearsals and then some songs might just not work, and then they'll get rid of them. But um, quite a few of the songs in it this year, I remember looking through the list, being quite pleased, going, "Oh, I know that one. I know that one." Um, just from years of, I would have done it years ago in another band. And then for the songs that I didn't know or wasn't familiar with, that when I joined, it was very much at the same time as rehearsals. So the first couple of rehearsals, I didn't even play anything. I just turned up and they were
Nice.
just playing through the stuff, and I was just listening. I just said, I'm just going to listen, because I don't, especially on songs that I didn't know. So there's no point in me trying to, if this is the first time I've ever heard the song, and then you just go away and learn it. As long as you got it for the gig, it's all right.
When you talk about sort of putting the show together, of course, the show runs, and then what they do is they refreshes it once a year, or
Yes.
so
Yeah,
they do a
it
whole
changes
new
every
show.
year.
So the show's still running, and they're rehearsing up a new show. They're putting it all together for that next season that comes in.
Yeah.
So for anyone who hasn't seen that show, so do you run? It's pretty much from the 50s through to 90s.
Yeah, I think it says 80s on the post.
Okay.
There's a couple of 90s songs in it this year. But yeah, it's just sort of like a retrospective of rock and roll, basically, in chronological order. First half, 50s, 60s, second half, 70s, 80s. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so popular as well. It changes every year. So, and I was amazed when the first time I watched it. I remember speaking to Jared after that show, and he said, "Yeah, and then a couple of months we'll get together and write the new show." And I was like, "What do you mean write the new show? Like you've got a great show." He's like, "No, no, every year we change it." And I said, "Not every song though." And he was like, "Yeah, every song." I was like, "Okay." It's great. Keeps it interesting for them and for those that go and watch it.
As a keyboard player, then, so with that, were there any songs in there? I guess maybe the 50s and 60s. You got some. You're going from playing maybe piano and some string lines and
Yeah.
perhaps some mellotron, some Fender, a bit of Wurlitzer maybe. and then moving through the 70s, some electric pianos, maybe some of the big Yamaha electric pianos, those huge things.
Oh, I know that sound. Yeah,
Is it the
certainly a bit of
CP?
that.
I forget,
Yeah,
it escapes my mind at the moment. And then some string machine sounds, and then in the 80s, of course, it all
synths
opens up.
everywhere.
So was there anything particularly that that you had a track for that you thought, okay, well, I've really got to dive into this. This one creates some challenges. Use any samples, for example?
Um, samples. Well, they do use. We do use click tracks and backing tracks as well for things that can't be performed live. For things that you can't create live, um, like drum machines, for example.
Yeah, sure.
One of the songs in the show this year is a Whitney Houston song that has, um, I think it's a 808 drum beat at the beginning. So that's just programmed in and
Yeah.
out, because otherwise I could probably, change the setting on here to that and do that, but then I couldn't play the other things. There were a few songs where at first I listen to it and think, God, there's a lot going on this, and then I'm thinking, how am I going to do all that? Like there might be a piano and then a string part as well, and then but you can get with the technology now. You can get very creative with these things, and you can layer them up, and you can set one key to play a whole chord, or you can trigger samples or whatever. So I'd listen to a song and think, oh, that's going to be hard, that one, but once you sit down, actually more often than not, you sit down, break it down, and go, oh, that was a lot easier than I thought it would be. The hardest ones were ones that were technically challenging to play. So that in the Christmas show we did Bridge Over Troubled Water, and all that is just a piano, but it's quite a demanding piece to play. So when I saw the list, I thought, right, I'm going to start with that one because
There's some chords in that.
yeah,
Real gospel passing chords. There's a load of the passing chords, aren't there?
yeah, it took a bit getting my head around that one.
So the Kurzweil you got there, is that the one you use on stage?
This is my setup for That'll Be the Day. I use this Kurzweil 88 key. It's called PC3K8.
Nice.
And this 2-manual Hammond as well. And I have them in this sort of configuration on stage so the audience will be there. I used to use a smaller Hammond and I'd have it above this one, but I recently upgraded to this. I still use the other one for other gigs like at the Cavern Club. But yeah, these two keyboards are what I use, and between the two of them, it's got every sound I need, really. This is a Hammond SKX Pro.
SKX Pro. So that's fairly new, isn't it? It hasn't been around that long.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's pretty. It's got a color screen and everything. So that's how new it is.
Fantastic. And my understanding of that keyboard is that you still got those great Hammond sounds, but some of the other sounds they've upped their game on some of the other sounds. Is that basically what it is?
Yeah, the library's bigger than the SK1, but a lot of the sounds on it are the same as before. But I think the Hammond engine sounds a little better because it's sort of 10 years ago. I think the SK1 came out, or 10, 15 years ago.
Just around the Kurzweil. Just as far as the show you're doing at the moment, do you have any of the sounds that you particularly like using? Are there any sort of songs where you got multiple splits that you can just give us a quick demonstration of?
Yeah, I'll show you a few things. One of the things that I bought this keyboard for was for very nice brass and string sounds, because they can sound a bit rubbish on certain keyboards. Including the ones I had before. We do, in the current show, we do a song called These Boots by Nancy Sinatra. Oh. And there's some intermittent horn parts in there.
Yeah.
Trumpets and saxophone. So I split it, so I've got the saxophone down here, baritone sax, and the trumpets in the middle. And it comes in and it just sort of goes. But with this, it's got a thing called aftertouch, so if you push down on it, it gives a nice swell to the notes. And for keyboard, horns, and sax, I think that sounds pretty good.
That sounds lovely, man. That's it's such a it sounds like brass, doesn't
Yeah, it
it?
sounds real enough.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Have you got any other sounds you can quickly demonstrate for us?
Yeah, I've got some nice French horns and strings for the beginning of Release Me
Oh
by
yes, okay.
Engelbert Humperdinck. And again, you can sort of use the aftertouch to get expressive with that.
Nice.
Some nice pianos. When I was doing Bridge Over Troubled Water, I would really push the reverb up.
Nice.
From the best example of a split I've got here would be with some of the sounds I use in Beatles gigs.
Oh, that'll be great, yeah, to hear that.
So if I go to All You Need Is Love, I'll also show you here. I've loaded some samples on here as well. So the intro, rather than playing it, because there's so much of a iconic sound, the band prefer to just go
Sure.
just trigger a copy from the song, just because
Yeah.
it's it's such an iconic sound, and you can't. It just doesn't sound as good when you get that on a keyboard. Then further on into the song, I've got all the horn parts, and the trumpet part, or the sax part that does the
Nice.
that. I need a solo saxophone as well
Yeah.
later on in the song for the In the Mood motif at the end.
Yeah.
But for this, because I'm also playing stuff down here, I've programmed it so that if I push the sustain pedal down, it
Yeah.
adds in, it turns a single note into a chord, basically.
Fantastic.
So just with the single note going, and if I take my foot off, it will just be
That's
notes.
great.
And it's I don't consider it cheating. I consider it using the tools that you have in front of you to their full potential.
Absolutely, not at all. So that's this is the kind of thing that's really interesting to hear. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I've never heard of that. So how do you do that? Is it so the pedal just adds like a? Oh, I see. So the pedal will trigger probably another MIDI channel, which is detuned.
Yeah, basically, you
That's really
put in
clever.
another layer, transpose it to wherever it's supposed to be in the chord. You might have to do it sort of key by key, because
Yes, that might not.
you're not going to want the exact same interval.
Yeah, yeah. That's a really good idea, actually. I'm going to absolutely use that.
Yeah,
I've never done that before.
so it's quite easy to do. You can change the sustain pedal to do
Of course you
whatever you want. Basically, you've assigned it to
Yeah.
to a different function. There was another song that I did in a John Lennon show. I can't remember how exactly to play it, but I remember there was I had layered up some chords onto single keys for a song called "How Do You Sleep," and I remember there was one key or one or two keys where I'd ran out of room on the keyboard because I've also got the electric piano here.
Nice.
And I needed another chord, but I'd ran out of room, so I've set the sustain pedal to change the chord. So
Nice. Nice.
if I press that and now press the sustain pedal, you'll hear the chord change.
That's great. Well, folks,
It's been a good couple of years since I played that song, so I can't remember why I did that or how to play it now. But
yeah.
I just remember like I was really scratching my head trying to work out how to put all those parts in, and I remember thinking like I'm getting really complicated here. But
you've only got two hands. You've got to go with what it is. But some of those are genius ones, man. I know quite a lot of tricks and things. I haven't heard of those, so I'm really grateful that you shared those with us all. Look, you threw it out earlier. You can't let you get away with, and we spoke did it in the intro. So you played at the Cavern Club. So that's a
Yes.
very cool thing to do. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I just I deck for the on keyboards for the resident Beatles tribute band.
Wow.
They play there every Friday and Saturday every week. Um, and I'll probably go there every couple of months. I'm in the middle
Wow.
of a 5 week run there at the minute. Excuse me.
Wow.
But yeah, they're great fun gigs because it's in Liverpool where the Beatles started, where they played when they started out, and it's always sold out every gig, and it's just a room full of Beatles fans, so you can't go wrong really. it's,
Fantastic.
it's
So
great fun.
if you're doing a tour of Liverpool and you go to the Cavern Club, say hi to Sean.
Yes,
Uh,
if I'm there, I'm not always there, but
Not always there.
but by all means go anyway because it's a great show. Yeah.
I think that just gives a really good indication of the level of musicianship, which I know that you have, and I hope people check out the work you've done. Just so, we have been asking everyone on these interviews just around whether how they do their monitoring. Do you go in ears or do
Yes.
you go
Yeah, I'm
in ears?
I've used in ears now for a while. All the theatre shows, yeah, and at the Cavern Club. Um, and it's great because you can just hear everything crystal clear. I find it really useful, especially if you're singing as well, because there's nothing worse than trying to sing and you can't hear yourself, or try and harmonise and you're not getting anything, because then you'll go off key, And I did go back recently, maybe last year or the year before. I remember doing a gig where I was using a monitor again, and it was a pub gig, and I could hear my keyboards fine, because that's fine, because I've got this little amp which I'd use if I can't use monitors, and that's
Okay.
fine. But it was the vocals, I just couldn't hear what I was singing, and I don't have a loud voice anyway, so maybe it affects me more.
So it's something that I'm starting to get into, just but really early stages. So
Mm.
is there, when you do the in-ears, do you have an ambient mic? Do you have a mic that's
Yeah,
bringing in some of the room as well?
we do, yeah. And that's good because without that, you can feel like you're playing to nobody. Um,
They try, yeah.
Especially when there's a bit of comedy in that with the day as well. And
There is.
sometimes if you've not got that in there, it sounds like they tell a joke and it's like, hello, there's nobody laughing, or at the end of the song a big cheer, obviously, which is what you want to hear. Um, but yeah, that's useful to have. Although I remember one time because of the room we were in, I was getting the reverb back off the wall,
Right.
and it was like such a weird delay that it was making me go out of time,
Right.
because I was getting the audience clapping,
Okay.
but the echo of it was coming back at the wrong time, and it was throwing me off. So I remember sort of having the monitor engineer take it down in my mix after that. But
I'm pretty sure in the past
yeah,
I played in that theatre. I seem
yeah,
to remember this A theatre where it comes back at you from the back wall. There we
yeah.
go.
There's probably a few. Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few. I'm sure there's a few. Fantastic. And then there's something that you haven't mentioned. So there's a little keyboard just to your side there.
Oh yes.
I'm sure that's got a story. What's that all about?
Oh yeah. I brought it out especially. So I'm glad you remembered to ask. Um, yeah. This was the first keyboard that I played
Oh
at
my
home.
goodness.
Yeah, it was my dad's old keyboard.
And that's the
Um,
actual keyboard.
yeah, I meant to say when you said how did I start out, there. It's a
Fantastic. That's how you started out.
Casio Tone MT68 electronic musical instrument. I don't know
Fantastic.
how old it is. Probably from the 80s, and
Does it
takes
does it work?
it does work. It takes power, and its only output is a single mono jack,
Nice.
and it has a little knob where you can tune it up or down, and that should be in the middle, hopefully. And the sounds on it are terrible,
Of course.
and I'll show you some of them. This apparently is a piano.
Okay.
I mean, it sounds more like a Rhodes,
Yeah.
but then it's got an electric piano,
Okay.
which sounds like I don't know, it doesn't sound like anything.
Sure.
Um, but I don't think I've ever done a gig with it. But I remember I did take it to a rehearsal with the Beatles tribute band years
Nice.
ago because I could get a quite a decent sound, or decent enough for Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds.
Ah,
I mean, it's not perfect, but it was that was the only use I found for this
that's
keyboard.
pretty good.
So,
That's not so bad.
and then when I got the Hammond, that
Yeah.
actually has. Okay, have you got the Hammond SK2?
I've got the SK2, yeah.
Yeah, which is the same as the SK1, just it's
Yes.
two manual. So
Yeah.
you'll have the same sound on there, and it's on here as well
Okay.
for that song. So yeah, that's much better. But
That's great. I
did you know that was on there?
I tend to use the Hammond just for the Hammond sounds, and then I
Yeah.
use it for the clav because you can use the expression pedal for the
Yes.
wah.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You've got
I
the
know you can
wah
do that
clav.
with that as well.
Yeah,
I've not actually played around with that. I don't play much clap
that
on anything. I don't
that's
think.
that's really cool,
Um.
actually. So
Yeah.
those are really the only two sounds I've ever used. I've kind of
Right. Yeah.
quickly gone through the rest, and it's funny you mentioned. I actually I think it's called Lucy something, isn't it? I
Yes.
remember now seeing there's one. I was just like going through. Oh, I'm not going to use that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
oh wow, that's great. That's
Yeah.
really interesting to know.
There's there's a few on it. It's always funny because you go through the names of the sounds on there, and you
Yes.
can tell what they're going for.
Yeah.
They've sort of maybe to avoid copyright, they've changed the title slightly. Or
Yeah.
there's one here called "Gimme Times Three,"
Yeah.
and I thought, oh, I
I
know what that is.
know what that is.
It's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
This is great. So I've had a listen and just loved your original work on Bandcamp.
oh, brilliant! Thank
So
you.
of course, and you can hear all of these wonderful influences.
Yeah.
I take it you listen to you're a McCartney fan and go through the years. Tell us a little bit about your original music. You've had some singles out. It sounds fun. It sounds great, man.
Oh, brilliant! Thank you. Yeah, I've not got too much stuff out. I did a song called "Deja Vu," which I wrote a couple of years ago, and I've recorded it, finished recording it, and filmed it in this room actually.
Nice.
So there is a video for it on YouTube. I don't know if you've seen it, but if you have, it's very much where I'm sat now.
I haven't seen
Um,
that. I'll watch that.
and then yeah, I just had a few other songs that I don't write music a lot, but or certainly not complete songs. But I just had a few that I thought, oh, I better finish these, and some of them they've been recordings that went back a good few years that I just hadn't finished, and then I got sort of a handful of what I thought was the best ones, and released them last year as an EP on Bandcamp, and then yeah, sent a few of them out as singles as well. A few of them have been played on the radio, which is cool.
Excellent. And so, just on Bandcamp, how do people find you there?
Just pop my name in, yeah, Sean McAusland, or
Oh.
put in half cut. Sean McAusland half cut. You'll either find that or you'll find some pictures of me on a night out. Um, but yeah, it's on Bandcamp. That's the EP where there's 5 songs plus Deja Vu,
Yeah,
and 3 of those songs are also available on streaming services as well, Spotify and all the others.
fantastic.
Um,
That's
I'm hope
absolutely.
I'll probably release it all onto streaming services eventually, and I want to do some more just because it's fun. Um, it's like gardening, just don't want anything out of it, just do it because it's fun.
Fantastic.
Um,
So, I mean, there's a lot of people who watch this who are perhaps starting out and, thinking, how do you get from a little keyboard to playing in front of 3,500 people?
How'd you get from that?
Yeah, to playing in front of 3,000 people on the road, with a 16-wheeler truck taking your gear down the motorways of the UK and going across to Canada and all the places that you go to. So,
Yeah.
what's your advice to those people?
Just practice. Make sure you keep practicing. That's something that I'm never not trying to get better, if you know what I mean. And then when I compare like how I can play now to even like 5 years ago, there's stuff I can do now which doesn't seem remotely challenging or strange to be able to do now that I wouldn't have been able to dream of playing back then. So I think just keep practicing, keep going for it.
And
And
I think, are you like myself? Did you study? I didn't study at all. I didn't have
no, that's
lessons or
it.
anything. Just
No,
learn by yourself.
I had I was taught guitar, electric guitar,
Okay.
by it was a guy called Neil Davis. He was in the Selector, a band
Okay.
from Coventry. It's a ska band. But that was my only sort of education in music. I self-taught everywhere else. Even in the early days of YouTube, even back 15 years ago, there were still great resources on there for learning things. I remember that's how I learned lots of Beatles songs back in the day. Um, but a lot of it as well is like some people I think, and I think I've got a pretty good ear as well, so I learn a lot of things by ear, and that's something that I think you can learn as well. You can train your ear. It's not just something that you have. I don't know.
Sure. And I guess again a little bit of this, and one of the reasons for making this is to perhaps encourage people to become keyboard players or perhaps move on through.
Yeah.
And I guess once you've got the skills and you're working on the skills, which you'll continue to work on, you'll always be working on stuff. You'll always be trying to work out how to do something, how to make something happen.
Mm.
But then I guess the idea is to get out there and work with other musicians, right?
Well, that's it. Like, basically, just get out there and play. Go down to the open mic down the road, down the local. I mean, I've certainly done that for years, and that's how I got good at singing, was just by going out there and doing it regularly, and doing it in front of people. And then I remember the first time I sang a song. It was only a very small pub, but I was terrified. And now singing in theatres, it's sort of doesn't phase me at all because I've just gotten used to it over the. But it wasn't overnight. It was obviously over years of doing it. So.
Actually, if you mentioned singing, let's just talk a little bit briefly about that, if that's okay.
Mm.
So that'll be the day. I've got some astonishing vocalists, some
Oh,
accomplished
absolutely.
and just harmonies are just incredible.
Yeah.
And of course, walk right back. So how do you find? And look, I guess you'll that'll be the day experience is still quite fresh in your mind. What was it like stepping into that and then going, okay, I'm gonna blend with these vocals. How do you find your space?
Uh. I don't know really.
Did you find it naturally, or was it something you had to think about?
I can tell that those guys have all been singing with each other for a long time.
Yeah.
Um. Because they know how to blend their voices. So I think I just have to really pay attention, listen to how they're singing, and sing the same way. Especially when you're all singing in harmony together.
Yeah.
One of the songs in the show this year is "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother,"
Nice.
where we all do the big chords throughout the song here and there. And I remember us all sitting down working them out, and just when you're singing that many voices together, you can't sing like a lead singer. You've got to listen to how they're all singing it and sing it the same way. And I'm sure they all do the same thing as well, because you're making a chord together.
Yeah.
But I was also very aware, thinking like these guys know immediately who's going for the top one, the middle one, the bottom one, because they know because they've sang together for so long. So I was aware of that. certainly when coming in and singing with them. Um, and also singing. I sing lead on a couple of songs. Um, well, one song in this show. I did two in the Christmas show, and again, that's sort of yeah. It was a bit daunting, thinking like I'm on stage with some really amazing singers here, so I've got to be good as well.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Thank you so much. So to if you want to check out Sean's work, so that'll be the day. You can see them on Facebook and Instagram, and of course on their webpage. Walk Right Back, same sort of thing. Facebook. I'm not sure if they do they have an Instagram?
Yeah, we're on
Yeah.
all the social media. Yeah,
All the
yeah.
social media and also their own Facebook page, your own Bandcamp.
Oh yes.
Do check out that. Sean, thank you so much for coming along and
No,
sharing some of your experiences. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you, and I so appreciate your time.
no worries. Thank you very much for having me, Steve.